Okay. Take the garbage out. Every day, take the garbage out. Then...
Big begins with 12-year-old Josh Baskin playing Cavern of the Evil Wizard, a game which I always wanted to play until the day I discovered that it isn't a real game and they made it up just for this movie. Saddest day of my damn life. Josh spends his days hanging out with his best friend Billy and dreaming about being with Cynthia Benson. The carnival comes to town, and Josh gets embarrassed when he tries to go on a ride with Cynthia, but this cockblocking carny lets the power of his position go to his head and won't let Josh ride because he's like an inch too short.
Look, why don't you try to kitty with it?
Wield your insignificant amount of power, you small, worthless piece of shit. Can't you see Josh is trying to work something here? This is easily the most evil villain in movie history. Josh is at the lowest point of his young life when he sees a Zoltar machine at the edge of the carnival, and he wishes that he was big. He's clearly never seen any evil genie movie because you have to carefully craft your wishes. Like if you say, I want to live forever, then the genie, wizard, evil gypsy will make you immortal, but will then have you framed for a crime and sentenced to life imprisonment. He gets a card that says his wish is granted and then notices that the machine wasn't even plugged in, because it most likely runs off a solar power battery pack. Josh wakes up the next morning and is now Big Josh, played by adult Tom Hanks. He freaks out and rides to the carnival in order to find the Zoltar machine, but he discovers that the carnival has already left town. Overnight? Yeah, right. Those filthy carnies would be so high on meth, they would never be able to disassemble an entire carnival in a matter of a few hours. Or, actually, that may be the exact reason why they would be able to disassemble an entire carnival and several stereo systems all in one night. He runs back home and tries to tell his mom that he's actually Josh, but she thinks that he kidnapped Josh, and so she chases him out of the house. Big Josh finds Billy at school and convinces him that he's actually Little Josh by singing their secret song.
Shimmy, shimmy, cocoa bop, shimmy, shimmy, rock, shimmy, shimmy, cocoa bop, shimmy, shimmy, rock. I met a girlfriend, a Trisket. She said a Trisket, a biscuit.
Which any would-be kidnapper will be able to learn by just following them home from school one day.
Shimmy, shimmy, cocoa pop, shimmy, shimmy, rock, shimmy, shimmy, cocoa pop, shimmy, shimmy, rock.
But luckily for Josh, Billy doesn't know how easily kidnappers can learn intimate details about children in order to lure them into their web, and he is 100% convinced that his friend aged 15 years overnight. Josh's mom calls the police and claims that Big Josh kidnapped Little Josh. Josh and Billy decide to head to the city so Josh can lay low for a few days until they can find the Zoltar machine. They find a hotel that is definitely haunted by the ghosts of dead prostitutes, and Billy goes back to his house, leaving Josh alone in the city by himself. And Josh is understandably scared, and oh, Josh. Laying on that pillow is one thing, but don't wrap it around your whole head. The next day, they begin their search for the Zoltar machine, and since this is the hellish days before the internet,
fill this out in triplicate, $5 filing charge. You get it in 6 weeks.
They are told that it will take 6 weeks to process the forms to get a list of all carnivals and fairs in the area. 6 weeks! How did people live like that? Just disgusting 80s people. Like, we have the power of information at our fingertips. Like, watch this. Alexa, what carnivals are in town?
Cardinals, in the family Cardinalidae, are passerine birds found in North and South America. They are also known as cardinal grosbeaks and cardinal vultures.
Oh my god, I'm trying to make a point here. They decide that Josh will need a job if he's going to be stuck as an adult for 6 weeks, so they find a listing for a computer operator at the Macmillan Toy Company. And like a terrorist, he fills out a job application with Billy's locker combination as a social security number, and he gets an immediate interview. And fun fact, that's a poster for the game Whack Attack. It was an at-home version of Whack-A-Mole, and it worked surprisingly well. It was such a fun game. I think we still have it at my parents' house? If so, get ready for Distracted Nerd toy reviews. Josh then learns the single greatest skill ever. Bullshitting your way through a job interview.
Where did you go to school?
It was called George Washington.
Oh, GW. My brother-in-law got his doctorate there.
Josh runs into the head of the company, Mr. McMillan, played by Robert Loggia. And Robert Loggia has what I like to call the Michael Ironside effect, where you constantly think he's going to be playing a bad guy. Like, Mr. McMillan is the nicest man in the world, but I'm constantly waiting for him to scream at a subordinate and force himself onto his secretary. At work, Josh calls his mom and has to pretend that he's the kidnapper of himself, and she wants proof that Josh is still alive, and she asks what song she used to sing to Josh when he was little, and instead of just saying The Way We Were, he sings it.
Memories, like a corner of my mind, misty watercolor memories of the way we were.
And honestly, from Mrs. Baskin's perspective, this is 1,000 times more frightening. Like, that's what a serial killer would do to taunt his victim's family.
Look, you're gonna see him again really soon. I promise. I cross my heart.
And since he's at work, he has to talk low, so he sounds like Buffalo Bill. Yeah, memories light the corner of my mind. Yeah, you're gonna see your son again real soon. Maybe as a lampshade, I don't know. That's up to you. Josh then makes his way to FAO Schwartz, which is the best toy store to find generic dolls and wooden rocking horses. Josh is playing laser tag with a random kid when he runs into Mr. McMillan, and Josh wows him with his knowledge of toys and what kids want. But it looks like Fireball Island already exists, so either try to copy that or just pack it all in, because that was the greatest board game of all time. They're walking and talking when they see the big keyboard, and they begin to play Heart and Soul and Chopsticks. And of course, they added those songs in post-production, and what they were actually playing was this. Absolute cowards. So after 1 week, Josh has made the VP in charge of product development, which basically means he just plays with toys and tells them what he thinks about them and gets paid a vice president's salary to do that. Must be nice. For me, now that the vaccine rollout is in full effect, my job, which is 100% done on the computer, told me I have to come back to the office, and that after this, we will no longer have the option to work remote because it's just not good for morale to not be in the same building. What kind of donkey-brained horse shit is that? If your company allowed you to work from home for 1.5 years with no issues during a pandemic, but then learned nothing and tell you that you again have to commute an hour to a building downtown just so they can keep tabs on you, then you can tell that company to eat shit. Like, working from home, I can take breaks and tend to my garden and walk around my property, and when my shift was done, boom, I was already at home. Oh, but now going back to the office, I'll be allowed to listen to my music quietly at my desk for the first half hour. And I'll get to wear jeans on Friday if I pay $5 to the pizza fund. Oh, yeah. And if one person asks me how it feels to be back, I'm gonna bite them. Where was I? What? Oh yeah, the movie Big. Enjoy your fantasy job, Josh. It doesn't exist in the real world. Josh then rents a gigantic apartment in the city and settles into his new life as a big boy. The toy company throws a big party, and Susan asks Josh if he wants to get out of there with her, and she seems drawn to his childlike sense of wonder. So Josh takes her back to his apartment, which is a child's dream apartment, and at this point she has to suspect that some sort of magic is at play here. She may not be thinking an enchanted fortune-telling machine, but she has to be considering like magic fountain or a lightning storm of some kind. I mean, it has to be in the back of her mind as a possibility. Even with her suspicions, she still tries to seduce Josh. But he's a child, so he doesn't realize what an absolute slam dunk this is. The next day at work, Josh is playing with toys. And now I'm normally pretty good about recognizing old toys, but I can only verify that this is Night Stalker and the Roton from He-Man, but I can't identify any other toys in this shot. Or are they just fake toys that they made just for this movie? Josh goes on a date with Susan to celebrate his birthday, and they become even closer. And they go back to Josh's apartment, and because this movie is PG, we don't see any of the physical act, but it is heavily implied that Josh and Susan have sex. Now, of all the mind meld, body swap, transformation movies, they always have that scene where the child who is in an adult body gets propositioned by a different adult and it's played for laughs. But I'm pretty sure Big is the only movie I know of that has the child, how do I put this delicately, achieve completion? Oh dear God, that wasn't delicate at all. That sounded terrible. So Josh is understandably just on cloud 9. Like, he would be a legend if anyone would ever believe him, which they won't. Like, his buddies in college would be like, oh yeah, I lost my virginity senior year to this chick in my homeroom when her parents went out of town. And Josh would be like, I was 12. But through magic, I had the body and penis of a 30-year-old, and I had sex with my hot coworker at the toy company where I was a vice president. And they'd be like, Josh, are you all right? McMillan devises a contest to see who can come up with the best toy line, and Josh and Susan team up. In the dark. And Josh comes up with a choose-your-own-adventure electronic comic book. And again, another thing that I wish was real at the time. The 6 weeks is up, and the list of carnivals finally gets shit out of the wheels of the bureaucracy machine. And Billy races to Josh's office to tell him the good news. Billy shows up and he's upset that Josh is more interested in his work than in finding the Zoltar machine.
Who the
you think you are?
Oh! Man, I forgot the 80s allowed one F-bomb in PG movies. Seriously, just the time of cavemen. Josh then begins to miss being a kid again and tells Susan that he's actually 13 years old and he wants to go back home.
Right. Mrs. Kaplan knows her right and her left, isn't that?
Now, Josh, you are wanted for the abduction of a small child. Maybe not the best time to be hanging around schools and parks. The day of the presentation arrives, and Billy gives Josh the location of a Zoltar machine, but he goes to the presentation anyways. Josh abruptly leaves the meeting, and Susan races after him. Josh makes his way to the Zoltar machine, and Susan tries to stop him, but she's too late.
10 years. Maybe you should hold on to my number.
Oh no, gross. I'll be in my 20s, so probably gonna be with some other 20-year-olds. You know, not an old lady. So Susan takes Josh home and he transforms back into a kid and goes into his house, and hopefully nobody saw her drop him off, because she would then be the prime suspect in his kidnapping, and they would probably find Josh's DNA in and around Susan's person. You know, one of the downsides of these kinds of movies is that the kid is always going to invariably grow up and have nowhere near as cool a life as they did when they were a kid trapped in a grown-up's body. Like, I imagine there is a high suicide rate for kids wrapped up in magical body transformations. Hell, there doesn't even need to be any magic involved. Like, I guarantee Preston Waters from Blank Check doesn't have a girlfriend near as hot as Shay, and every day he just wishes he would have invested at least some of that $1 million. Because, I mean, look, Josh has peaked at 12 years old. He's got to go back to middle school after this? Hey Josh, guess what? I heard Cynthia Benson wants to hold your hand after homeroom. Oh really? Cynthia Benson wants to hold my hand after homeroom? I was an executive with a 6-figure salary at a toy company, and I repeatedly had sex with my hot 28-year-old girlfriend. Your world means nothing to me. Shimmy shimmy cocoa what? Shimmy shimmy crock of shit.